In this oak tree, I'm going to be creating a lot of negative holes, so lots of little sky holes. And rather than using masking fluid, I'm simply going to use a technique whereby I paint around the negative spaces. I will be using my synthetic fan brush that comes from my line of brushes. I call it the Ivory Fling. It's really nice because it's got a very firm bristle and the bristles stay splayed. That's the perfect fan brush for natural results. So I'm going to start with gamboge as a base, and we're painting an oak tree here, let's say. So what I want to do is make sure the arc of the brush is pointing outward and always towards the outer contour. And as I'm stamping this brush down, I'm using different facades of the brush. I'm not just pressing all the way down every single time. Sometimes I'm going to be using the tip of the brush. Sometimes I'm going to be using the corner of the brush and just a few of the last few little spikes or fronds. And what I want to do is start off by keeping a lot of negative space. In this case, it's just the white of the paper. A tree is a little denser in the middle, so that's actually quite nice. Now before that dries, I want to add a little bit of raw sienna. And notice that because the gamboge was wet, the raw sienna is actually bleeding, and it kind of gives it a nice result. I'm going to add a little bit of burnt sienna here too. Just dabbing it in very, very lightly, just for a little extra character. Now, here's an important tip. Before the foliage dries, I think it's really important to get some of the lighter branches painted through the negative spaces. I'm going to be using my brown-based gray, which is the burnt umber, Prussian blue, and violet mixture. I like getting some of I'm going to just blot with some tissue to create a little bit of a highlighted and light diffused edge here. Now before this foliage completely dries, I want to actually paint on some of my branches. I'm using a brown gray made out of Prussian blue, violet, and burnt umber. While some of the bleeding strokes might seem a little scary, it's actually a really beautiful thing. When it comes in contact with that wet paint, its diffused lines make the branches a little bit more natural looking. And we get this really nice combination of sharp lines and soft lines. And regardless of the paint combination that you're using, having some of the brown bleed into the foliage gives it a little bit more of a natural, earthier look. You want to have a variety of lines here, thick and thin, and you don't want them all just spiraling out from the center. You should have some that actually physically branch off from each other. I'm going to use a little bit of water on my brush to lighten this color up. This is just a generic oak tree, but it could very well be a maple as well. And that's it for our first layer. Now that this is dry, I can add a bit more contrast. I'm going to go back into my raw sienna. And because I'm working on a dry surface, I'm going to end up with a nice crispy kind of result. Earlier I mentioned that the light's coming from the left-hand side, so I'm going to focus this newer, darker value range on the right-hand side. Here's the burnt sienna coming in here. You don't need much for this to evoke a sense of fullness and fall. It's so tempting to put in all of these colors and all of this texture, but that is in fact what ends up making a tree look very contrived. So we've got a little bit of shadow on the canopy, and now I want to have a bit of shadow on the tree trunk itself. I'm going to go to my blue-based gray, which is my Prussian violet and burnt umber mixture, and add a little bit of shadow on the side. In fact, I'm going to carry it into the grass.